Hi everyone, just a very quick comment video today, which was actually sparked by an email I received this morning from a client, which she hilariously just titled Fat. And that kind of took me off guard to start off with. I was like, what's this going to be about? It was not at all what I thought. So when I actually opened it up, I was quite pleased because what she was asking was for a bit more of a definitive answer on saturated fat, basically, and all the stuff in the news recently about coconut oil. So if we talk about what they're saying, there's been some new research from the American Heart Association, and what they were saying is that coconut oil is not good for us because it's saturated fat, and we should just not have saturated fat, and that's the end of it. So where do we even start? I guess we start with saturated fat in general. What we need to think about with saturated fat is the way that it behaves. It's solid at room temperature. It's got a very regular chemical structure, so it's quite stable, but also if we think about it, it's quite inflexible. And the way it then behaves in the body mimics that. It makes things inflexible. Our cell membranes are all made up of fats, and so if we have a majority saturated fat in our diet, we will have inflexible cell membranes which don't allow our cells to communicate with each other properly. Things can't cross over very well. We get things like insulin resistance, inflammation, cardiovascular issues, those kind of things. So what this research is then saying is that we should get rid of all saturated fats, including coconut oil, and instead have the majority of our diet coming from unsaturated fats. Unsaturated fats would be your liquid oils. You can think about them, they are much more flexible and fluid, and that's how they will behave in the body. So overall, I agree with that statement. The thing is, lumping coconut oil in with all of the other saturated fats, which are things like lard, goose fat, beef dripping, those strips of fat in red meat, butter and ghee, diminishes from the other wonderful health promoting properties that coconut oil has, which is to do things like support our gut microflora, which helps our digestion and our immune system. It also is antimicrobial, so it can help with our oral health. There are many, many benefits to coconut oil which we don't see in the other ones. I do, however, say that I agree with the whole balancing act, but the other thing that this research doesn't talk about is those unsaturated fats and differentiating between them and how you use them. So if we talk about all liquid oils all in together, that would be almost like saying that a beautiful organic olive oil is the same as something like a sunflower oil. Now we know that sunflower oil and vegetable oil aren't particularly good for us because the composition of the actual basic fat within that oil, sorry for getting a bit complicated, is different to that in an olive oil. And when you break that down and use that in your body, it becomes inflammatory, whereas olive oil becomes anti-inflammatory. And we always want to strive for an anti-inflammatory state, which is why people always talk about things like omega-3 in oily fish and flaxseed oil, which is amazing. So the problem here is a lack of differentiation. The people who were in this study were already eating diets very rich in saturated fats, in things like pies and pastries, biscuits, tarts, pre-made foods and fried foods. So therefore, if you suddenly add coconut oil in, however brilliant and wonderful it is, it's not going to do you any good for your health because you've already got too much saturated fat in there. What we want is a beautifully balanced diet, one which is rich in really health-promoting unsaturated fats and a little bit of saturated fat, but good saturated fat. So that's the thing to talk about. One other point to mention is they don't talk about unsaturated fats and how we should use and store them. Now, all those wonderful health-promoting benefits of unsaturated fats are only there if they haven't been oxidized. And the flexibility of the structure within a liquid oil means it's much more vulnerable to oxidation. So as soon as you start heating it, it's all gone. It will oxidize and then you produce harmful chemicals that will just cause havoc when you ingest them. Not what we want to do. So we use the chemical structures in different ways. We've got a nice balance. We've got a big amount of unsaturated fat, less saturated fat, but that saturated fat is the one that we use to cook with. So coconut oil is the most studied for this in terms of how long it stays stable, which is why I talk about it again as being a benefit. It's the best one to use. So generally, don't fry. It's not a good way to support our health. We want to do things like braise and poach and steam, maybe a little bit of stir fry, roast, that kind of thing. But if you are going to use a little bit of oil to cook with, then go for a saturated fat. That's a good thing to do. Generally though, we want to go for our unsaturated fats, and we use them cold, make pestos, dressings, drizzle them on food once they're cooked, absolutely fine, and eat the whole foods as well. So have your nuts and seeds and avocados and whole flax seeds and chia seeds and hemp seeds, oily fish, all wonderful. So this is what tends to happen. Statistics only show the majority, fails to do the little bits in between, and then we get blanket sweeping statements that seem really confusing. So that's my really short roundup of the whole fun world of fats. There are so many different aspects, so if I failed to cover everything, which I might have done, please send me an email, message me, comment below, and I will come back to you as soon as I can.